Look, Pa, that guy's streaking. I won 2 games in a row. 2. You can't do that around here. This is a family neighborhood. Get out of here. Pre-workout's been downed. Works in an hour or two, so let's get through this as quickly as possible, shall we? Not that I'm not enjoying it, because as you can see, we've moved up to the 3rd spot, so this is going to be a pretty hype recap this week for the Tyrod Taylor Cover Band Football League. But I digress. We're not going to spend too much time diving into the psyche of the players or anything like that. We're just going to give a straight up recap this week, which might be a nice break from the long-winded monologues that I typically go on. But this week, unfortunately, I'm on a time crunch, so now we have to get it out as quickly as possible. And this is kind of what the league is looking like at this point. Defending champ, pardon me, at a 5-1 record, Killer Kowalski loses his 2nd straight game, but we'll get into that in a second, and it drops to 4-2. Zan State Fur Assassins, that's me, leading the pack of the 3-3s, because they do put this in standing. I'm guessing it's because I've scored the most points. I think that's it. Followed by Cleveland Chubs, the team that gave me the beating, but had a rough week this week. The Marvelous Chase underneath him. The Lou Boy made his way up from a rough start to being in this middle of the pack log jam. Punishment Incorporated getting a win, possibly streaking out because his team's looking real good. And I'm not going to call you that, Brandon. The Kunai with Chain is at the bottom, and we'll get into that in a second. I'm not going to make big predictions on anybody's players because I was wrong on a lot of things last week. I will iterate, this has been a rough year to try and predict in fantasy, but somehow it's working out for me. Not for everybody, though. So now we go to the scoreboard. We're going to go to week 6 before we get to this and talk about every single one of the box scores. And what a perfect way to start than from the Zan State Fur Assassins versus the Kansas City Kunai with Chain. You need to change that back. Come on. And just looking at the initial thing, it's really obvious to see what happened. Although a couple of Brandon's players did explode, like Jaden Daniels outperformed Jalen Hurts barely. Drake London performed both of my wide receivers together. And tight end Slam Laporta outperformed Tucker Kraft in a very good Tucker Kraft type week. But ultimately, I had to lay the beating on you because you stole my Broncos from the waiver wire, which is kind of why I want to do a 2-for-1 trade at some point. Because George Kittle's coming off the IR, and so now my revolving door that I sub in and sub out people to make up for the bye weeks is gone, and I don't want to risk somebody picking up my thing, because I don't blame you for picking up the Broncos. The Broncos are the #1 ranked defense in the league right now. I'm pretty sure fantasy-wise the Seahawks might still be #1, yeah, but the Broncos are ranked #6. They have 30 sacks. You know what the next ranked team has? The Seahawks have 20. The Broncos are crazy, and even though they won a pathetic game, they limited the Jets to 11 and now are making people second guess Justin Fields. So I don't blame you for picking them up, but I'm glad my team had retribution in store. But also, if your team had performed up to expectations, this would have been a match. Like, it doesn't look like it was that much of a match. But if Saquon Barkley just played up to projection, if Jahmyr Gibbs played up to projection, it would have been much more interesting. And then, of course, kickers this year suck, dude. Screw Cam Little for missing his one and only kick. Even though it was against my defense, so I can't be too upset about that. But the running back core that I drafted came and performed what they were supposed to, because my team didn't necessarily perform up to expectation, but when you have Bijan Robinson scoring 38.8, Jonathan Taylor scoring 24.7, and Josh Jacobs scoring 32, on top of Jalen Hurts, who has a 29.25 game, that's really all you need to have happen. And I made the right call for putting Justin Fields on the bench. He had, the memes are going around, -10 passing yards because he was sacked 9 times. I don't think that's talked about enough. But I'm still going to keep him, and I still have confidence in him. I also have confidence in Rico Dowdle. I'm pretty sure he's earning a starting spot, so keep an eye out for him. Not that I need another running back, hint, hint. And I think a lot of people are making the story of the game that if Brandon had played Cam Scadaboo, it would have made that huge difference. And how could you leave him on the bench? Like, not playing Cam Scadaboo against a formidable Eagles defense was a stupid call. It wasn't. It was a good call. It just didn't pan out. Like, having the Washington running back going against the Chicago defense was a lot more of a favorable matchup. Or even Breece Hall. You could use that Saquon Barkley logic from a few weeks back where since the Jets passing would have just been absolutely useless against Denver, which it was, Breece Hall would get more handoffs. Obviously, they just got shut down across the board, but there's more logic there than just expecting Cam Scadaboo to score 3 touchdowns. I will not believe anybody in our league that's like, I knew it was going to happen. No, you didn't. Be quiet. Because I know a couple people were giving Brandon a hard time about that. And I think I don't see anything wrong with the call. It just happens sometimes. But I'm also the guy who leaves DK Metcalf on the bench with 19.5 points when my other 2 wide receivers don't even break 6. But don't worry. I'm coming for you guys next. LaMarvelous Chase gets inched out by the defending champ, pardon me, on the back of Patrick Mahomes. What really is there to say? Derrick Henry finally has a decent game. Hits that 15 benchmark, which I always consider 15 that decent game territory. And McMillan as well. But other than that, you look at the lineup, not very impressive. He literally rode the back of Patrick Mahomes, which is cool. He's been doing that all year. And I keep talking about the MVP standings. Here, let me bring that up real quick. So as you can see, I have a Google Doc that literally lists everybody's MVP points right now. Christian McCaffrey edges out Josh Allen as Killer Kowalski's MVP. Even though he's been out for a few weeks, LaMarvelous Chase has Lamar Jackson as his MVP, though Baker Mayfield, he's closing in. 20 points for Patrick Mahomes on Pardon Me. Easily has been carrying him all season. I mean all season by like the few games we've played so far. Punishment Incorporated probably has the most diverse group. Jahmyr Gibbs, before he was traded to another team, had 8, but it's Jackson Smith and Njigba and Devon Achane are the top guys for him. Jamar Chase is quickly becoming that guy, though. And then Matt Stafford and Puka Nacua just dominating the way for the Cleveland Chubs. And then for me, it's Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs. Surprise, surprise, shocker, shocker. And for those who are wondering, yes, Justin Fields is outscoring Jalen Hurts right now because every game I've played him, he's scored like 30 points. Knock it off with your, Justin Fields sucks. He doesn't. I believe in him, dang it. And then the Kunai with Chain has Jaden Daniels as his top spot with 10. And in spite of his unfortunate play, Saquon Barkley is there with a healthy 5. And the Lou Boy rounds us off with Emeka Egbuka and 3 different QBs. See, he doesn't have that one player that blows up week after week, but he's been doing just enough to win. Even his hated AJ Brown has 3 points, so. And that Texas D. But that's just to give you an idea of what is kind of going on. But yeah, riding the coattails of Patrick Mahomes, that's probably the reason he won this, and Derrick Henry and McMillan doing just enough to push it up there because Dobbins, Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen left stuff to be desired. But LaMarvelous Chase was a little bit more spread out. It just wasn't enough. But Ramondre Stevenson put up 1.8. Alvin Kamara on the bench put up 12.6. If you had played him, you would have won. I mean, you should have known, right? I'm just being a butthole, man. But it does kind of suck that way, how it plays out sometimes. And even though I could say, like, oh, I liked Alvin and the Chipmunks better, both of them have been equally inconsistent, so I can't even criticize that thing. Because on the equal side of things, you could be like, pardon me, why'd you play Jake Ferguson when you played Dallas Goedert? No. It's just not the way it panned out. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, but Michael edges out another victory. And that's been the impressive thing about him this year is he just keeps edging out victory after victory after victory, which we'll get back to in a second. But first, let's keep going through these matches. The Lou Boy knocks off the Cleveland Chubs, ends their win streak. Mainly because Puka Nacua got carted off in the middle of the game. James Cook didn't really get an opportunity to keep going because the Falcons scored often and early. And so the Bills never really got a chance to establish their run game. Calvin Ridley is on a struggling Titans offense. Njoku, Quinshon Judkins, unfortunately felt the wrath of the Pittsburgh Steelers steel curtain. Another thing I should probably bring up is, dude, Travis, Cameron Dicker has 5 points on your MVP thing. That dude's been consistently good. Your kicker? Are you kidding me? And he got an extra point because he was your highest scoring person. That's crazy. And kickers already get a point boost because it takes more for them to score points. I am glad Ashton Genty seems to be in full form for you, though. But unfortunately, when your teams are producing that low, it doesn't matter how much the core root of the Lou Boy is struggling with all of his consistent people not putting up numbers. All he needs is 1 or 2 or 3 people to put up more numbers than yours. The team with the most points at the end of the game will be the winner, John Madden. Nothing really to communicate past that. It was just a lot of unfortunate luck for Travis more than anything, because there's no doubt in my mind that if Puka Nacua wasn't carted off against a Baltimore, that's the rough part too, is I was just talking about like, ooh, that's rough, Matt Stafford and Puka Nacua going against the Baltimore Ravens defense. And then Puka Nacua gets carted off. But just imagine if they had got to play the entire game, what that score could have looked like. But congratulations, Landon. You are now 3-3. Landon, I don't say there are too many must-win games this season, but I felt like this really was one because it tightens up that middle and gives you that much more of a chance to compete and push your way into that top 4 spot now that everybody's locked into that middle way. And then finally, Punishment Incorporated puts up the most points for the week against Killer Kowalski, handing him his 2nd consecutive victory after he was removed from perfection. Josh Allen has another rough performance. This time against the Falcons. Christian McCaffrey's a stud. George Pickens is the big number for the Killer Kowalskis this week. And ironically enough, Chris Olave. Chris Olave even putting up a decent number. Me and Alex just talked about how he's not the most reliable source of fantasy points. Primarily because he doesn't really have a consistent quarterback or offense throwing to him. As much as we all want Rattler to find success, he unfortunately has not. But it was kind of a work with what he got because Bucky Irving's been out, so he had having Rachaad White, who didn't have a terrible performance. Punishment Incorporated just have that much of a better one with Devon Achane, his arguable MVP, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, his also arguable MVP, both showing out on top of Dak Prescott, who's having an MVP caliber performance. Jamar Chase with his 25-point performance. It didn't even matter that the rest of them didn't show up. He was already outscoring you. I do find it funny that the one time he didn't play Ladd McConkey, I can't even fault him for this. Although it was against the Miami Dolphins defense, I feel like you don't watch these recaps, Richard. But seriously, the one time you didn't play him, that's the time he shows out. It just figures, but it doesn't matter because yeah, you could have put him in the flex spot, but you put in the two right wide receivers, so it doesn't even matter. But it just figures. I just had to say that. But that's just a quick recap of all of the ones from this week. Let's go into the ones for next week because then I'll be able to finish a lot of the points that I have started. Because going into this upcoming week, the defending champ will now have to defend himself against the Zan State Fur Assassins. Prepare yourself for assassination, Michael. Which should be a pretty interesting matchup across the board. It has me projected to win, but as we've established this season, projections really do not matter. Pretty much, I give him the edge in quarterback, I give myself the edge in running backs, him the edge in wide receivers. Kinda. I would give him Justin Jefferson the edge over DK Metcalf. Deebo Samuel going against Dallas, I would give over Devontae Adams, especially if Puka Nacua is back. George Kittle versus Jake Ferguson is a toss-up for me because Jake Ferguson has consistently been, is he still ranked number 1? He is. So it's hard to say, especially with how Dak Prescott's been playing. But with George Kittle returning, Mac Jones has very limited options. I think George Kittle's going to be receiving a lot of love in his first week back. And I don't know. Would you take Bijan Robinson over McMillan in the flex role? I think we'll give myself the edge on that one. But it really is a toss-up across the board. His team has been consistent, and all I'll say is I hope I score what I've been scoring, because if I do, I have a very good chance of winning. Because he has not put over 150 this year, and so if I put 150, 160 up, I feel like I should be fine. But I don't want to count it out, because anything can happen in fantasy, and it could be, across the board this year. And he has some, for whatever reason, really like Minnesota's matchup against Philly, especially since Philly's kind of in an identity crisis right now. I don't know. The matchups all across the board are interesting this week, and I like my matchups better. But like I said, pardon me's aren't bad matchups. They're just more interesting than mine are, because I feel like mine are favorable. I don't know. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, even though I did. Cleveland Chubbs going against LaMarvelous Chase. This is pretty much people trying to secure a win in that train wreck, that log jam in the middle, and whoever wins can push themselves up across the pack, because I don't think anybody else in the league has a 3-3 going against a 3-3, so should be an interesting one. Puka Nacua is questionable. I don't know if they're going to force the issue against Jacksonville, who's been kind of good this year, good at turning the ball over, especially forcing fumbles, catching interceptions, playing hard defense, hurting you, making sure you feel it afterwards. And so Puka Nacua's return might not be good for that. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But with the Cleveland Chubbs staying true to their name and having a ton of Cleveland players, that might come to work in their favor, because they're all going against Miami. Quinshon Judkins should be able to run. If Jerry Jeudy gets some targets, because it's up to Dylan Gabriel, they should just put Shadur Sanders in, man. Be like 5 touchdowns apiece. Calvin Ridley is that Titans offense, man, is rough. I love me some Cam Ward. I hope he has a great career. Right now, that offense looks garbage. It's just a rough situation across the board. So I hope Calvin Ridley does okay, but it's rough to see. Cameron Dicker's going to probably get you 80 points because he just never stopped scoring, apparently. And then that Lions D against Tampa Bay is concerning, because Baker Mayfield, who's on the opposite side of the spectrum, is an MVP candidate in his own right, and he continues to be that. So this is going to be an interesting matchup all the way around. David Montgomery also going against Tampa Bay, a nice healthy array. Jaylen Warren going against that Cincinnati Bengals defense that we talked about last week. Xavier Worthy going against Las Vegas, which could go either way. I'm eager to see how this one plays out. This is the potential match of the week right here, for no other reason than 3-3 versus 2 consistently inconsistent powerhouse teams that could just explode for points. And I am eager to see how it plays out. So this could be the potential match of the week. And then it's hard to predict this one because Punishment Incorporated has not filled out their lineup yet, but that is okay. I believe Rashee Rice is returning, so you could see that come into play in the flex role. I'm not going to try and predict anything or ruin any of Richard's plans. But all I will say is I'm not going to predict Saquon Barkley. He's going to explode one of these games. I am believing in that. I don't know if it's going to be against the Vikings. And that's not I don't know if he can do it against the Vikings. He could totally do it against the Vikings. I've just been wrong so many times, I don't want to talk about it. Jaden Daniels should be able to gunsling against the Dallas Cowboys, putting up similar, if not more points than last week. Probably more points than last week because he had multiple turnovers last week. Jahmyr Gibbs, Nico Collins going against some, not Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs going against a spotty Tampa Bay defense. Seattle with Nico Collins is what I would be worried about, but Drake London going against San Francisco, whose defense has been kind of a letdown this year, is a great matchup. Some interesting matchups, not as easy to predict as it was a week ago where everybody was going against a for sure, terrible defense. Like I said, though, it is hard to predict because Richard doesn't have half of his players in, but CeeDee Lamb does return, and that kind of offsets Dak Prescott a little bit if he does choose to play Dak Prescott. So we'll see. It's all up in the air. Richard's team was the highest scoring last week, so you never want to look down on them. And like I said, the dude's always plotting. He's got experience more than any of us in this league. And just look at that bench ready to assemble his troops and send them off to war. It should be a great week of fantasy football, we should see this break up a little bit. And hopefully after all is said and done, we will have that definitive top 4 for at least a week. And maybe see some changing down here, but let's see. I've already talked too long. I've already failed at the speed run, but hopefully, guys, I did enough to keep you coming back for next week, because here at Tyrod Taylor Cover Band, we have the meats.